Why don't we go ahead and get started, folks? Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining our webinar series, Shutting Down Incinerators and Building Zero Waste Futures. Today, we will continue with the second webinar of this series titled Community Zero Waste Plans. My name is Marcel Howard. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Zero Waste Program Manager for the US Canada region here at GAIA, also known as the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and I'll be your moderator here for today. Today's session, an exciting one, Community Zero Waste Plans, is the second in a three-part series brought to you by GAIA's Failing Incinerators Project Cohort. GAIA is a global network of over 1,000 grassroots groups, NGOs, and individuals, and over 90 countries around the world working together at the intersection of waste and environmental justice. Now, the Failing Incinerators Project Cohort, or also called the FIP Project Cohort, or the FIP Cohort, is a core group of partners fighting to shut down incinerators and environmental justice communities and set forth healthier alternatives towards zero waste systems that support and empower their communities. So before we begin, we just have a quick housekeeping note. Chris Tandanzo uses they, them pronouns, and Maria Gillian uses she, her pronouns. With GAIA, we'll be managing our tech support and moderating the chat. We have enabled the Q&A feature for this webinar, so we really encourage folks to add your questions there or in the chat, so we can hold some space to answer those questions at the Q&A at the end of this webinar. We would also like to take a moment to thank our partners in philanthropy. The Failing Incinerators Project wouldn't have been possible without the generous support of the Freedom Together Foundation, in addition to the Plastic Solutions Fund and the BE Fund as well. And in today's session, members of the FIP cohort and their partners will explore the challenges, the breakthroughs, and the opportunities in pushing for and implementing community-led zero waste solutions after an incinerator closes. Now, closing incinerators is just really the beginning of creating a just transition towards safer and more sustainable waste management practices. And over the past few years, the FIP cohort has not only played a key role in shutting down failing incinerators, but has also helped strengthen anti-incineration efforts across the country, both within the GAIA network and reaching across movements, driving progress in zero waste, climate justice, and environmental justice as well. And to date, 3 out of the 6 incinerators targeted by the Failing Incinerators Project have officially closed in Michigan, California, and Oregon. And these successes were the result of persistent grassroots organizing, strategic collaboration, and a refusal to accept toxic waste systems as the inevitable. And just a quick round of applause again to all of those incinerators that we got shut down. Again, just the beginning, but we're looking to see that success elsewhere as well. And so this year marks GAIA's 25th anniversary, and in that time, GAIA has grown into a powerful global network, working alongside grassroots organizations and strengthening local movements to drive systemic change. In a time of escalating climate threats, this kind of solidarity is more essential than ever to create a sustainable and just future for all. With continued collaboration and support, GAIA aims to support the closure of more incinerators, promote zero waste solutions globally as well. So, without further ado, I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk and want to hear the project. So why don't we jump into things? So first up, we have Andrea Luna. Andrea Luna uses she, her pronouns and is the policy analyst for the East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. Andrea grew up in Huntington Park and now lives in the city of Bell. She became passionate about social, environmental, and food justice during her first year at East Los Angeles College, where she became involved with East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. Andrea is dedicated to challenging social, environmental, and food injustice impacting her community and communities like hers. So without further ado, thanks so much for being here, Andrea. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marcel. Are you all able to see my screen?
We see you, but we do not see your slides.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Luna. As Marcel mentioned, I'm a community member and also policy analyst over at ESR Communities for Environmental Justice. ESR Communities for Environmental Justice is an environmental health and justice nonprofit working towards a safe and healthy environment for communities that are disproportionately suffering the negative impacts of industrial pollution. We recognize and promote the full and authentic community participation in making policies that affect us directly, promoting the implementation of environmental justice guidelines for local, state, and federal government and agency, as well as industry. ECR promotes direct democratic decision making and taking collective action for safe and healthy communities where we live, work, learn, and play. And so often our incinerator fights, we often ask, are any fights and campaigns that we work towards? The question we ask is, what is it? And so this map that you see here was created by Whitney, who was our previous zero waste organizer. And a lot of the incinerators are often built in Black, Indigenous communities of color. This is a map of Los Angeles County, where you're able to see the different waste management facilities where incinerators. This was the Commerce Incinerator, the Commerce Refuse to Energy Incinerator, and this was the Southeast Resource Recovery Facility. There's certain landfills as well and transfer stations. And so our first incinerator fight was the Commerce Refuse to Energy facility, when members came to us as a team and began asking questions why Santa Monica, which is located on the west side of Los Angeles, was suddenly in our community. And that's when we came across the Commerce Incinerator, and folks began questioning, like, what are they doing here? What's happening? And that's when we found out that their waste was being burned in our community while we were bearing the brunt of the pollution. And so we began organizing efforts, attending city council meetings, and meeting with our officials to shut it down. Luckily, at the time, one of the strategies was Commerce. Their permit was up for renewal. And the Commerce Incinerator was owned by the state. It was just operated in the city of Commerce. With partners like GAIA and Valley Improvement Projects, we were able to pass something called AB 655, which was a legislation that would not allow trash to be considered a subsidy, are considered a renewable source of energy, which allowed the incinerator to shut down in 2018. We then shifted our efforts to the city of Long Beach with the South Resource Recovery Facility, SURF, which was located in Long Beach. So the next question we ask often is, like, how does this impact? How does this affect us? Folks began organizing. We have a membership down in Long Beach and West Long Beach specifically, where members, this has been like a constant fight. SURF was operating for decades. The Long Beach City Council had poured millions of dollars, I want to say $8.7 million, for the operation and maintenance of SURF. Incinerators are dirty. It's a new technology, incineration, meaning a lot of the technology fails and breaks down. And because of this, it requires a lot of investment. Folks began coming together and we started doing visioning sessions of what zero waste would look like in Long Beach. With the support of Zero Waste USA, with Dennis and Ruth Abbey, we developed a draft of our zero waste plan in Long Beach. And there we found out that more than 90% of what is sent to SURF could be recycled, reused, or composted. In tangent with that, we began doing some research with our partners, Valley Improvement Projects and Earth Justice, on a report called Vestiges of Environmental Racism, which helped us in our efforts to close down the incinerator, not only in Long Beach, but in Northern California, which Valley Improvement Projects successfully shut down of last year. What we've seen here, everything that was getting sent in SURF was being burnt, and it would produce this toxic ash you see here, and it would have to be sent to a landfill. So incinerators depended on landfills to dispose of their waste. And then also what we seen with SURF was that their permit renewal was going to happen in 2024. And so folks began organizing this bill called AB 1857, which was authored by Christina Garcia, this bill would redefine incineration as disposal. Before, and then it would remove diversion credit cities had counted towards the recycling goal for burning waste. And it would create a grant program to invest into zero waste infrastructure programs in impacted frontline communities. What we were seeing before was that cities like the city of Long Beach were essentially using SURF to say that they were recycling. They were burning waste is considered recycling. And we know that that's not true. Recycling is not burning waste. Covanta had produced around 96,000 tons of ash per year, where SURF was producing 150,000 tons of ash per year. And this ash contained heavy metals, toxic compounds, and all of that. And so this is a lot of the organizing efforts that were led from our envisioning circles, which then led to establishing our zero waste committee that created the zero waste plan, and then organizing with our partners across the state, like Californians Against Waste, Earth Justice, Valley Improvement Projects, and GAIA, and supporting for AB 1857. On the other side, we were building local, what do zero waste communities look like? What are community-based solutions that we could create? Along with our visioning circle, our visioning sessions to build our Long Beach Zero Waste Plan, we were also building our compost hub. The video you see right here was last year. We were celebrating our 3rd year of our compost hub, which is located in our members' house. And the intention is, oftentimes we see, we don't wait on the government, we don't wait on industry, we don't wait on agencies to support us in building the communities we want to do. So we build the communities we want to see, envision, and live in, with the spaces that we do have. And so the closure of SURF happened in January in 2024. When AB 1857 passed in 2022, SURF had cited that they would be shutting down sooner because their permit was supposed to end in June of 2024, because it's no longer profitable, because now they weren't getting subsidies or diversion credits, excuse me. They weren't getting diversion credits from the government anymore for burning their waste. And so here you see a lot of the workshops we host at the Compost Hub. This is a clothing swap, while also having a mending workshop. These worms are from our Compost Hub. The Compost Hub has also expanded to a community space that folks now have, where people are growing their own fruits and vegetables and bringing it and distributing it back to one another. They're making orange juice for the volunteers and for folks that are passing by. It's also been a space where folks come and create art, for our events and workshops that we're hosting. We also are at the Huntington Park Farmers Market. And we invite folks from the community to come out. This is a seedling workshop where folks are showing one another how to grow food in their homes or other spaces that they have access to. This is a recent herbal workshop we recently had. This was as a result for the LA fires, to support folks. How do we support each other when there's events that are happening? And this one was herbal support for regulating our nervous system and supporting our nervous system. And then the fight doesn't end here. Even though SURF has shut down, we have been working not only across the state and across the US, but internationally with other folks in other countries and frontline workers like the Teamsters, Local 396, to support what does this look like? What does this transition looks like once we shut down the incinerator and build the communities we want to work with? It is also how are we supporting other communities? How are we standing in solidarity, not only locally, but internationally, for fighting for the communities folks are want to see and want to have. But yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate it. And I think just one, if I could just point out one thing that you sort of brought up there, and it's how zero waste sort of supports healthy communities as well. We're looking at it from that holistic approach, right? We're not just addressing greenhouse gas emissions and how to handle our waste, but also supporting a more holistic approach to creating healthier communities for all. So thank you so much, Andrea. Really appreciate that, those insights. And as a reminder for folks, if you have any questions for Andrea or any other thoughts, please add them to the Q&A function or in the chat, and we will definitely answer that during the Q&A at the end of this webinar. So thank you again, Andrea. We will next hear from KT Morelli. KT Morelli uses she, her pronouns and is the organizer with Breathe Free Detroit. KT is a longtime Detroit activist and organizer of Breathe Free Detroit, whose grassroots campaign successfully shut down the city's incinerator in 2019. And she works internationally, nationally, and locally to advocate for environmental justice and a zero waste future. So without further ado, good to see you, KT, and I'll turn it over to you.
So I come to this table like Andrea as a member of another environmental justice community that's just downwind of the now closed incinerator. It's amazing how our communities are connected through adverse health outcomes and so many other horrible things because we've just lived close to a waste processing facility. And we share these same issues with communities across the world. In the US, we have a variety of zero waste systems, about 70 incinerators still in operation, and an attack from the fossil fuel industry on our communities from fracking oil to for new plastics, and all the way through proposals for chemical recycling facilities to deal with these plastics in ways that harm human health and our environment. I'm going to talk today about the Midwest region and our story of a community-led effort happening in Detroit, Michigan, as it's an incredible example of how to move with justice through our waste crisis. I'll be talking about a unique and important collaboration between the Mother Earth Foundation in the Philippines and Detroit's zero waste leaders in organic waste management, as well as some city initiatives that keep community voices at the table for other zero waste work happening. Breathe Free Detroit is a community and grassroots campaign that was formed to shut down the Detroit incinerator. And after 33 years of community activism from many organizations along the way, on March 27th of 2019, the Detroit Renewable Power incinerator shut down for good. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. There are so many things that shut this thing down, and we couldn't have done it without the support of so many. Our community, which is just downwind of the now closed incinerator, has been practicing zero waste as an act of resistance years before the incinerator closed. Yet when the incinerator shut down, there was no city plan for diversion of materials to zero waste systems, and we're still building that plane as we fly it. So the trash that went to the Detroit incinerator that came from all over the place, Canada, many different states around us, many different counties around us, is now going to a nearby landfill, and our burden of trash is now put onto another community. The mayor and city council of Detroit now realize that recycling and composting are going to be key elements in our future waste management systems, and seem to have a newfound immediacy for these systems when the incinerator shut down. This image that's showing here is of the underground water systems that feed into the Great Lakes. The
Hey,
red
team,
lines represent.
sorry to
Yeah.
jump in really quick. We're just noticing that the slides aren't moving.
Oh,
So we're
shoot.
those
Hang on.
slides. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Are we good?
We have shutting down an incinerator, what that means for zero waste slide.
Okay, so this is a picture of us, Breathe Free Detroit. And let's see if I can get back to my, can you see that? Did it advance?
It did not. No.
Bummer. Okay.
Oh, now it did. I think
Oh,
it might just be a little delayed. It might just be a little delayed, yeah.
okay. I'm just going to present it on this other view though. Let's see.
Oh, and we
Can you
see
all
that
see that?
perfectly. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yep.
is it going? All right, sweet. Okay. So, sorry. But this image, start where I'm going off. This image is of underground water systems that feed into the Great Lakes. And the red lines represent already polluted water systems, and the green lines represent unpolluted systems. And that star right in that map there is where the landfill is that is now taking all of the trash that went to the Detroit incinerator. So the urgency for true zero waste solutions is now. It's advancing, correct?
Yep, we got an
Awesome.
iron.
Sweet. So this is from GAIA's report of A Tale of Five Cities, Plastic Barriers to Zero Waste, which was published in 2021. So some numbers have shifted just teeny tiny bit, but I wanted to explain to y'all what we're sending to the landfill right now. That's sitting on top of these beautiful waterways. So on the left, you'll see that 91.6% of Detroit's waste is being sent to this landfill, and only about 8% of this waste is diverted. So that breakdown is 5% of municipal solid waste is diverted for recycling, and composting diversion accounts for only 3.5% of municipal solid waste, the majority of which is yard waste. Detroit provides seasonal yard waste pickup, and there's currently no city-wide food waste collection program. On the right is a breakdown of our waste going into this landfill. So that's that 91% of breakdown that's not being diverted into the zero waste system. So all the stuff on the right is going to landfill. As you can see, we have a ton of work to do. The city of Detroit has the potential to reach 80% diversion of food waste from landfills by 2023. Which would reduce landfill methane emissions by 71% and overall greenhouse gas emissions by 102% through regenerative farm practices that sequester carbon using compost from food waste. We are a unique city with an amazing, beautiful urban farm and green space ecosystem. You can find this data and more of GAIA's report at a link that I'm going to provide at the end. So one of the low-hanging fruits was to push for composting, right? And composting in the best form possible. From 2021 to 2023, in partnership with the Mother Earth Foundation in the Philippines, Breathe Free Detroit took a community-led advocacy approach in the Diane Marie Taylor Zero Waste Composting Pilot Program to inform best practices for the implementation of multi-scale citywide composting policy and program development in Detroit, Michigan. So the Mother Earth Foundation mentored us in best practices and implementation, and it was an honor to carry their deeply seated solutions into the United States. Many community members living near the incinerator fought to shut it down because of the health effects seen across our community that still exist today. This pilot was designed for backyard composting and small-scale community garden compost unit management. Our community members were co-creators and co-facilitators. Many of the participants played a significant role in fighting to shut down the incinerator and worked to starve the beast by increasing recycling rates and composting efforts within our community way before the incinerator shut down. So we knew that whatever we threw into our trash, we'd end up breathing in. The pilot focused on the importance of a decentralized multi-scale composting system approach that rely on thriving multi-scale composting. Most US cities adopt large-scale composting first, also known as municipal scale systems. These systems normally rely on single company composting facilities that pick up compostable goods from restaurants and residents, and then truck it 60 to 100 miles outside of the city to process. A decentralized multi-scale composting system relies on small to medium scale facilities that collect compostable locally. These facilities are spread throughout a city's districts and neighborhoods so that they stay local, allowing the compost facility to grow locally, hire locally, collect locally, and redistribute fully processed compost to nearby homes and gardens. Systems like these extremely reduce carbon emissions as trucks are not traveling as far and sometimes not at all, as in the case for all home composters, right? Another issue we faced in our region is that our state of Michigan is one of the cheapest states in the United States for dumping waste per ton. So other states around us and Canada sends us their trash, including hazardous waste, and they still send it and it's going to different places and still coming to our community in hazardous waste form as well. Our state has invested more in dumping and burning waste infrastructure than it has in zero waste efforts. While we face serious conditions of climate change, I'd love to see composting prioritized throughout the entire Great Lakes region, as this region provides 21% of the world's surface freshwater and is second to California in its diverse food production and agriculture. Good composting infrastructure increases healthy soils that retain water in flooding events that cause agricultural runoff and harms in our waterways. We need to be more prepared to support our farmers and crop production and changes and challenges that happen globally. Decreasing food waste in our landfills and incinerators is definitely part of that solution. Composting provides water quality, water retention, and aids in water restoration. I cannot be presenting here today without really acknowledging water injustices that we have in Michigan and cities like Flint, Benton Harbor, and growing in homes across the US. Water warriors across the globe are protecting our human rights for clean, drinkable, accessible, and affordable water. Water is life, and we can work to protect it through composting, refill and reuse systems, and zero waste in part of water justice. Globally, environmental justice communities are leaders in creating solutions for climate justice. Many environmental justice communities implement these solutions out of resistance and are experts in knowing what to do next. So we had some allies on the inside to help with our efforts. Our former recycling director of Detroit, now Eagles recycling specialist for our region, assembled a waste diversion advisory committee made up of NGOs and community groups that work on waste diversion for all areas. And we met throughout last year to create a community-centered framework for reducing waste, empowering neighborhoods, and driving sustainable growth. And that's one that will be guided in environmental justice and environmental health with community strengths and while uplifting the work that's already ongoing. And this report is set to be released within the next few months. The Green Task Force is also a really great place for community voices to be uplifted. It's made of various committees representing topics critical to supporting a healthier Detroit. Committees including water, renewable energy, energy waste reduction, climate action, and organics. Anyone can join and bring their unique experience to these tables, and it's a setup to bring the best ideas and sustainability to the attention of City Council and inform policy. I'm going to put more information about this slide because there's so much to read here, and I don't want to lose too much more time, but this kind of just gives a little bit of an overview of the importance of these types of committees that we can push for resolutions and actually get them passed. This was highlighting a resolution that that passed around for Detroit, where our subcommittee worked with council to pass the first in-state resolution to repeal the preemption law. And shortly after this resolution, a county followed with its own resolution, and then the county next to us followed with another resolution, and members of our community continue to work to show the state that we want to make sure that we have local regulations on single-use plastics. So having environmental justice at these tables is important while policymakers, lawmakers, and zoning departments redirect our waste into systems that are not incineration and landfill. We're not at the table. If we're not at the table, some public officials get easily swayed by cure-all folk tales of false solutions like chemical recycling. So we need to make sure that we stay at the table and So one of the other things I wanted to highlight before I end here is that most recently, not even a month ago, the city of Detroit released a request for proposals to explore the great potential found within a composting pilot. And it's a huge win to see the phrase multi-scale decentralized in their composting pilot that will take place this year. There's still so much work to do to show many lawmakers and regulators that this is a system, that this system is the best way forward for our climate, our public health, and our environment. And that's why everyone should be composting as a radical act to protect the planet and practice zero waste. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to put all these links into the chat for y'all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, KT. We really appreciate it. And just to point out, one of the things that you said, I think, which Brenda put in the chat, if you're not at the table, the industry is, or the way Brenda put it, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And I think that's a really good reminder for all of us that we need to make sure the EJ is always at the forefront of that table and that we are a part of that table as well. So thank you so much, KT. Really appreciate the insights. And now with that in mind, we're gonna have Brenda Platt close us out for our presentations for today. Brenda Platt is who uses she, her pronouns, directs the Composting for Community initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where she has worked for 38 years. Her current focus is advancing distributed composting that encompasses composting at homes, community gardens, farms, and other venues. And Brenda has a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the George Washington University. And she's a former chair and current member of the US Composting Council's Legislative, and Environmental Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for being here, Brenda. I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me, and thanks to all of you for joining. So I'm calling this the future of zero waste is local, and I think that this is good follow-on. I think Andrea and KT, the three of us are very much aligned on the importance of local and centering community, and the dangers of concentrated corporate power are being increasingly recognized given the political climate our country is now in. And I'll just suggest that answering the question of who profits from the solid waste management systems that we implement and fund, who profits is going to be key as we think about the zero waste programming and infrastructure that we want to be supporting. Just a word about ILSR, because this is obviously central to who we are. We are a 50-year-old national nonprofit. We celebrated our 50-year anniversary last year in 1974, and we've been promoting a homegrown economy, if you will, since then. We work in key sectors of the economy: waste, energy, retail, broadband. We have a big anti-Amazon campaign. And in all of these sectors, I think we bring our unique lens of promoting local economies that benefit local communities, whether it's rooftop solar or municipal-owned broadband, or pulling back the curtain on how American monopolies are fueled by structural racism. So all of these things are really connected. We have a long history of promoting non-burn solutions and fighting incinerators. I put up some examples here of zero waste plans. In fact, Austin was one of the first cities that actually defeated an incinerator after they'd invested millions of dollars, and has a pretty robust zero waste plan that folks can check out. We'll follow up with some links to some of these resources after the webinar. Baltimore and Montgomery County, Maryland still have incinerators, but there are active fights, and even the elected officials, city council or county officials, have agreed to close down those incinerators, and the citizen-driven zero waste plans are worth taking a look at. I will just say that sometimes there is a tension between high diversion at any cost and building the infrastructure versus building infrastructure and programs that keep the benefits local. So this is something I think hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit more about. I had the pleasure of we have a Building Local Power podcast at ILSR, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Gina McKinley at Austin Resource Recovery. Interestingly enough, she's the manager of Strategic Initiatives Division, which probably every city should have. But one of the things that Austin's doing is they're promoting reuse and a reuse economy, a circular economy program, and they've documented more than $1.1 billion in total economic activity that's resulted in approximately 6,300 permanent jobs. So just to give you an indication that a city like Austin or any city in America, if they're really embracing zero waste in a circular economy project with keeping benefits local, these are kind of the impacts you can have. Now, I focus on composting. All of these zero waste programs cannot get to zero waste or move towards a zero waste economy if they're not addressing organics. And you heard both KT and Andrea address organics as a key strategy. I head up our composting for community initiative as Marcel. We have do national forums, workshops, webinars. We have a podcast, we have a coalition, we have guides. I'm going to go through some of these. This is one of the infographics we produced a number of years ago, and I think it's the only one that really addresses issues of scale and what about local as kind of a guiding principle. So at the top, you have, of course, preventing waste and rescuing food to feed people. But then we have home composting and small scale, community-based, maybe farm-based, versus mixed waste composting. Not all composting is created. Not all anaerobic digestion is created equal. We're seeing a proliferation of large-scale facilities that have added depackagers in front of them to allow them to accept packaged food waste, which can then lead to more contamination of microplastics and PFAS. So we really want to drive the market towards source-separated materials, clean material, and safe compost and safe soil conditioners. So, and I think it really does matter if you're starting scale. So home composting is really important. I'm going to talk just a little bit about that, but really the space in which I'm going to focus today is really like on this small scale, decentralized, multi-scale that you've already heard a little bit about. And this could be composting or anaerobic digestion, by the way. There are anaerobic digesting systems that are the size of a shipping container and can be small scale. And just like composting, literally everything in between. But after kind of community scale, there's medium scale, locally based, farm scale. And then I just want to share that one of the things I love about composting is there's no one way to do it, and there's lots of ways and lots of sizes. And I'm just gonna, whether it's farm or community or industrial, just everything in between. What is community composting? It's kind of the not so radical idea that you're keeping the process local and that you're making and using compost within the same community or area or geography that is producing those organic food scraps and whatnot, and that you're engaging the community in some way. I'm just gonna, there's multi-bin systems like shown here. Composting is an aerobic system, so you need oxygen. So as you look at all these pictures or images, note how the air is getting in there, whether it's a pitchfork or a blower. This is an in-vessel system that's moving materials through the system. This is what's called an aerated static pile, which has a blower. There's a farm scale on the top left. On the middle, that's actually a site in Brooklyn, New York, that's open piles with no rodent issues, by the way, but in an urban area. Bay and bunker systems like this are very popular at the farm scale. These are called windrows, which are like kind of elongated piles that are turned by a windrow turner or tractor. Very common for yard waste systems as well as farm scale systems. Many do-it-yourself options. The bottom picture in the middle is repurposed shipping containers, so that are solar powered with blowers. This is a site in Maryland that I work with at an urban farm. And even within home composting, there's like a wide variety of systems that you can do. So we promote advocating for decentralized composting, as already been talked about. And one of the things that I want to compare this with is what is the status quo and what's really happening with the waste companies. And Andrea, I was really taken by a map that you showed earlier that showed the orange dots was the proximity of the waste disposal sites. I think the orange ones were transfer sites and the proximity to people of color. But this is the big waste profitable playbook. And what I want people to understand is there are just 4 companies in the US that control the $91 billion waste industry. And when they are doing this, they're controlling the collection routes. 3 companies alone control about half of the US collection market for collecting waste. Think about that, 3 companies alone. They also control waste transfer stations, which means more pollution, more truck traffic, often impacting communities of color. And that's valuable community assets in the form of recycled material that are leaving communities. And then at every step, big waste is profiting from this system, whether they landfill or incinerate trash. And just 2 companies are owning 48% of US landfill volume. So now contrast that with that playbook with one that can actually transform a community's waste to wealth. So in these next few slides, I'm going to focus on reducing wasted food to grow community. And we'll start with just like almost a quarter of the US municipal waste stream is made up of wasted food. That's a lot. And what we could be doing is avoiding waste and saving money. We could be educating households and businesses. We could be rescuing edible food to feed those in needs. For every 1,500, on average, every US family of 4 is wasting $1,500 by overbuying on groceries. So think of the savings with a targeted program to educate people on how to rescue or avoid that. And so instead of handing money to big waste companies, we could be composting with nonprofits, farmers, small businesses. As I said before, there's many ways to compost it, whether it's on farm or this windrow system or community composters and public housing projects as shown here, or at community farms and community gardens. And then when you're doing that, you're obviously enhancing local food production and the ability to grow local food. You're enhancing soil fertility and the ability of soil to hold, increase its capacity to hold water, building climate resiliency, and you're creating more local jobs, at least 3 times more jobs on a per ton basis than landfilling. And you're basically reinvesting back in the community in a circular economy way. We have many guides available. Again, we can send you the links to this following the webinar. We have how to guide on community composting done right. We have a fairly new guide on how to add composting to climate action plans. So check that out. A guide we did a few years ago is a guide actually for local government on how to set up backyard and home composting programs. We have an online community composting certificate course. That QR code was our campaign last year, so it's no longer good, but we'll be doing this again in May. So if anybody's interested in signing up for that course, let me know. We have modules on how to avoid rodents, because that's like one of the #1 things we hear about is rodents. Let me just tell you that rodents are here with our 24/7 open dumpsters. So food waste composting sites often get blamed, but they're the ones actually figuring out how to control food waste and rodent problems. And we have guides on that too. We have compost learning activities available for you to use with your schools and teachers and your own education resources. We have a lot of infographics and posters, which we are increasingly translating into other languages. If you would like any of these in another language, please let me know. We would love to translate those for your use. This is some example of some of the ones that are available in Spanish, as well as home composting. We have model signage that you can adapt, templates available for that. I mentioned we have a community composter coalition, which now has 374 organizational members in 46 states, plus a handful of other countries from the Caribbean and China and Russia and Costa Rica, including Iran and Lebanon. It's just amazing to bring people together across the globe. One of the things I'll share is that community composting is growing. We did a census of community composters a few years ago. We're getting ready to do it again. And 90% of the programs started since 2010 and over half since 2017, and they're scaling up. The benefits of these programs are just tremendous. I mean, there's so many co-benefits in terms of the community impacts. This is just some of the stats. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to give you an example that 71% provide community engagement opportunities, and more than 3/4 have active employees. We did some infographics showing these benefits for EPA. This is actually on EPA's website, and there's some 3 videos showing the social, environmental, and economic benefits. But if you will, let me just run through them. The social is not just food security, but it includes revitalized neighborhoods and green spaces, youth education, community empowerment. For environment, it's reduced pollution, healthy soils, climate resiliency. For the local economic development benefits, I mentioned jobs and, of course, dollars staying within the local economy, but also farm prosperity. And one of the things that doesn't come up very often, but I think is important to mention, is business innovation. When you're just investing in monopoly companies and there's less competition among businesses, you're not getting as much innovation because they're controlling the market. So when you're a community and you're investing in independent businesses and more competition, you're going to get business innovation. And we see that within this sector as well. Part of our census was asking what the top challenges were that were facing community composters. And those scaling up was number one, is shown kind of in this word cloud, but access to land, having adequate equipment, having customers willing to pay, which relates to policies. If more local governments were actually contracting with independent businesses and micro haulers and community composters, they would be more sustainable. And that's just one thing I want to end here, is that policies to encourage composting and food recovery is like really very critical. And we do have a composting policy resource hub and tools for action. We did a webinar last year on how to engage in policy making. I'll just emphasize, like, consider running for office. We've had a number of members of grassroots organization run for office and win, and that is an excellent way to have impact. But just some more resources. We have model policies from bans and zoning and compost amended soil requirements, and even procurement policies. Sometimes it's easier to pass a policy to procure compost than it is to pass a ban. So there's just many policies. And we also have many webinars that are available for free, including a series we did on government support for community composting. So check that out. And another resource is BioCycle. You can subscribe to BioCycle Connect for free. It's an online newsletter, and they have tracked periodically every couple of years residential food waste collection programs, and there's a lot of information in this research on the number of households, pilot programs, and the like. And this is my last slide. I'll just really emphasize that we should learn from recycling as we approach organics and food waste composting programs. Is that one of the things we did was kind of give away recycling programs to the monopoly trash haulers to design, and it moved from source separated high quality materials to single stream, and more contamination, lack of high quality markets. And we don't want to see the same arc with food waste collection programs. So source separate, don't privilege dominant corporations or just large industrial sites, be wary of depackagers, and avoid contamination. We have a webinar coming up April 2nd on focusing on outreach and education to reduce contamination in composting, and we'll be featuring community-based social marketing. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Marcel.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brenda. We really appreciate those insights there. And I think one thing that stuck with me the most, said early on in your presentation, you said, who profits from the waste management systems that we implement and fund? I think is a critical question we should be asking ourselves, right, when we're thinking about these systems. So thank you so much Really appreciate those insights. And thank you to the rest of our panels as well, to Katie and Andrea for their thoughts and insights also. This is the time where we can hear from all of you folks. So, we have some time for some questions from the audience. I know we have a couple already that I can ask some of our panelists, but please use the Q&A feature to submit any of your questions, and we'll try our best to get to answer all of them for you. So, this last one or this first one came up, I believe, under Brenda's presentation. So, Brenda, I'll ask this for you. Crystal is wondering, what are some of the more major red tape obstacles with zoning for composting infrastructure in cities? And after Brenda, if Andrea or KT, if either of you have any thoughts there, you can add as well. But Brenda, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question, Crystal. And I think a lot of times cities and counties are like, oh, we can't compost because we need a 50-acre site. And what people need to realize, both the advocates as well as city or county officials, is that you don't need 150-acre site if you actually are embracing a multi-scale, decentralized, community-led, centered program. And that is your framework, because you have home composters. So, we did a study in that home, yes, in my backyard report, that for every 10,000 households home composting, a city could save $250,000 just by not collecting things. So that could be like the first thing a city does, is look, how can we promote home composting? And then we're not even collecting the stuff. So there's no permitting, there's nothing involved. It's just education and outreach and giving out bins, providing training, setting people up for success. And then if you're supporting, KT, you mentioned Detroit is like got so many green spaces and community gardens and urban farms. So do an assessment of where those green spaces are. Now, in Baltimore, there's a lot of abandoned lots that actually weren't green spaces, and they're being converted to green spaces, and composting is an accessory activity to those community gardens and urban farms. So how much land do we have? Can you convert abandoned lots that now were places for drug dealers to hang out and trash to accumulate, and convert it to green space where neighbors can get together, as Andrea was talking about some of the benefits? So I just think, zoning is always an issue, and all zoning is local. I'll just refer you, there's lots of zoning resources. So, and we have model zoning legislation that we've worked with NRDC. So we'll share those resources.
Thanks, Brenda. And KT, Andrea, do you have any thoughts to add there? All set?
I'll just add real quick that just there's a few folks that I am aware of in the city that are really, I don't know, they're afraid of composting here. They are afraid of smells, they're afraid of the rodents, they're afraid of the things that are going to that they're going to have to regulate, and they're going to have to fine and figure out how to deal with it all. And some bad players from the past might have left some bad taste in their mouths of how to deal with systems that have just been left. So yeah, we're trying to change minds is also a bit of red tape, convincing there's still a better way.
Awesome. Thank you, KT. Andrea?
Yeah, I feel like the argument here in LA County is that we don't have enough space. And if we do have space, we need to build homes. And when they build homes, they're really building homes for people that are not from the community. They're building homes for people that are trying to come to Los Angeles. And I think that goes to other like problems that we're experiencing, like gentrification and all of that. They also view composting as unreliable. They're like, this is not possible. This is not like this. We just don't have the space for it. It doesn't make sense. And I think it's just a lack of education, but also, Brenda touched upon it in her presentation. Cities enter these contracts with these waste haulers, and these contracts are decade-long contracts. They're like 10 years, they're 20 years, they're 30 years. And oftentimes they just keep renewing their contracts because the city council officials don't want to they're just not knowledgeable, or they just don't want to deal with the waste and how waste is handled. And so I think when it comes to composting, um, I think it's really just the lack of wanting to be open to it. And I don't think space should be viewed as an argument in LA County, because just in our compost hub, um, our compost hub, like, it's very tight, but it's been operating for 4 years. This just next month we're gonna celebrate our 4th year anniversary, and we've diverted tons of waste ever since. And so it doesn't matter how much space you have or need. It's if you really want to see this, it's definitely possible. So it's either, when it comes to like the work that we're doing, we're not trying to depend on government. We're not depending on agencies. We're creating the communities we want to see with the resources that we have.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you all for your responses there. And I think, yeah, there's a lot that we can take from all of your experiences and into other examples as well in this work. So thank you for your answers. We have a couple other questions coming in, and this one is directed at Andrea. I'm curious to learn more about Andrea's work. What's currently happening with the SURF shutdown, and are you looking to use this example for future shutdowns?
Yeah, SURF has been shut down since last year. The city council has just been passing funding for its demolition and decommissioning. The last update that I received is that they're entering an executive negotiating agreement with the anaerobic digestion facility. We are opposing it just because there's a lot of plastic contamination when it comes. Anaerobic digestion is still burning waste. Um, in just California, there's this law called SB 1383, which is meant to serve as a food recovery and composting, but we're seeing industry come in with false solutions such as pyrolysis, anaerobic digestion facilities to replace incinerators. They operate like incinerators. They're not necessarily a solution we want for our community. We're advocating for resource parks. In my presentation, I talked about how what was going inside SURF was 90% that could have been reused, reduced, or composted. What we're trying to see is a resource park where there is source separation, where folks could come together and see what they could use instead of constantly purchasing and buying. Because what we also have at Long Beach is the Port of Long Beach. It's one of the top 10 ports used throughout the US, that goes through the 710 freeway that connects to the rest of the US, where it's the goods movement, where everything that's being shipped inside the US. Long Beach is not only dealing with the incinerator, but we're also dealing with other industries operating in our community. And so I think it's just really important that we're constantly pushing for zero waste. Long Beach City Council does have different departments that we're trying to work with to see how possible this is. There are policy and infrastructures that exist. We want to strengthen them, and we want to see resource parks. They exist. This is not a relatively new concept. In Santa Barbara, they've been operating for over 3 years. In Berkeley, they've been operating over 30, 40 years. In San Francisco, so it exists. These infrastructures exist. It's just the folks down here in Southern California, we're just trying to get them on board.
Gotcha. Thank you, Andre. I really appreciate those insights there. And it looks like we have another question that came through, and this is from Patrice Brown. And Brenda did do a little response to this, but I'll give folks to respond as well. But are you all using EPA's warming model to show the savings if cities convert to composting, and where could we find a calculator to help show savings and other benefits? So curious for folks, do you use the warm model from EPA? And if not, are you familiar with any other calculators that could be used here as well?
So I wrote in that we do use the warm model. There are some limitations to it. We've actually submitted comments to EPA even, a year ago about things that need to be fixed, like it doesn't take into account like carbon sequestration for using compost, for instance. But there's another one. I don't get the link to work, just because of somebody tell me if the link I put in actually works, but it's supposed to go to the refed calculator, which calculates the environmental and social impacts of food waste. It's unlike the EPA model. It's like, I don't really know what's behind it and their assumptions. So I'm not, so I don't know, but there are other calculators like that available.
KT, Andrea, you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, we use the WARM calculator for our report, and it's highly technical and not very user friendly for communities, but yeah, it definitely has those limitations, same limitations. Thanks for that share, Brenda. I'll definitely look into that one.
Andrea, any thoughts there?
Yeah, we used it during when we were drafting up our Long Beach Zero Waste plan. So we have the numbers. Dennis, who's a member, but also works with Zero Waste USA, supported us in understanding that tool. It is not accessible. I will kind of emphasize that as well.
Awesome. Thank you all. And I'm just going to drop a link into the chat. That's a link to some public comments that we provided as well on the EPA WARM model. Brenda, I think we probably submitted comments to the same process. So just give you a sense, but there are definitely some limitations in the WARM model. There are some groups out there that are trying to develop some calculators still in the works currently. So we might be able to see some additional tools in the near future on this as well. So just want to give a share out to that. And it looks like we have a couple more questions. We're doing pretty good on time, so feel free if you have any additional questions to add it to the Q&A function for our panelists. But one good question I'm sure everyone is thinking about right now, and it would be curious to hear from Katie and Andrea specifically about this is, how is the current administration impacting, or would the current administration impact the success that you have achieved so far? Just curious to hear your thoughts and has your approach changed, and how would you like to, or how are you all planning to move forward, knowing the existing political environment that we all have? And I know it's a tough one.
I don't want to get too far into the muck of it all, but yeah, it's really tough. We had a cumulative impact analysis that was going to happen for my neighborhood, for my community, for my zip code, that the EPA was leading, and now though all the funding has disappeared. And that type of thing would have helped the environmental justice communities across the nation. So yeah, we're having some huge setbacks, and we're lucky that the incinerator isn't still in operation. I still have yet to find out what connections this administration has with waste management facilities. I imagine that the increase of fossil fuels and coal and all the dirty energy is going to just increase hazardous waste being processed in my community as well. So we're still facing that. So yeah, there's some direct hits that have really, we made it, they're gonna just continue to make us all suffer. But yeah, how to realign. There's a lot of strategy sessions happening right now to realign to this new reality. But I'll end there and pass it to Andrea in hopes that maybe she could say some more.
Yeah, we're also in the same boat. A couple of our organizers, we were working towards the Alameda corridor. Alameda runs vertically north to south. So it hits the communities of like South Los Angeles, Southeast Los Angeles, where our members are at. We were supposed to have some workshops through the EPA and they canceled them. And yeah, there's that. Also, our communities are constantly under threat when it comes to deportation raids. So constantly diverting to like know your rights, doing those type of workshops, which is related to our work because those are our members and families and loved ones that are in our community. When it comes to a lot of our other work, our composting work is not like supported by any government agency. We're still gonna be kind of So we're still operating as is, but I'm kind of in the same boat. Like our incinerator shut down. It's more like seeing what's gonna happen. So just like kind of watchdogging what the city is doing, in terms of like the negotiating agreement, which hasn't, from what my last update, I haven't seen any updates during our city council. But yeah, I think a lot of it is fear mongering, so not trying to support that in our community and the work that we're doing. It's more diverting, seeing what we could do. Our organization's been through this administration once. I think this, what's happening now is a completely different scope where they're tackling like EJ specific programming and funding. I believe Grist posted a link to a map on where federal programs were being funded and where's that going now. And so that's been a tool that I've been looking at the past couple of weeks to seeing what is happening to this funding. If they're not funding these programs throughout EJ organizations across the US, where is it going? And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you so much for those insights. You know, it's an ever evolving situation and we're all trying to sort of shift and realign. So really appreciate just those insights and just of course all the fights that we're all trying to get through together collectively as a movement. So thank you for those insights. I have just two more questions for our panelists, if I may. The next one will be for Brenda. Brenda, curious, as the need for composting systems grows, do you think anaerobic digestion is sort of a proper pathway forward to include in waste management systems? Or I know you sort of mentioned there's some nuances there. So curious to get sort of a better picture of how AD fits to all of this.
Yeah, well, anaerobic digestion is a biological process like composting, but it takes place in starved oxygen conditions, whereas composting is aerobic, as I mentioned. And so the technology or anaerobic digestion itself is good. It's how it gets deployed. Is it a large scale system that's going to take mixed waste and coming out the other end is, soil conditioners that are contaminated, or is it going to be small scale and community led and centered around, community values and zero waste planning, as we've been talking about? So it's kind of, like composting, it's available in smaller sizes. And there are some companies like Vanguard Renewable, which got bought out by BlackRock, which is probably one of the most evil companies on the planet. And they have a very aggressive proliferation plan, including putting depackagers in front of their systems. So, again, who's profiting? So I that's what I can say about that is, again, keep asking those questions. Who profits? What's the size? Garbage in, garbage out. Keep this, reduce contamination, educate. Systems that are rooted in and serving community are going to have less contamination. And I just want to comment on the previous question, Marcel, is that just on the bright side, I think that a lot of solid waste management planning happens at the local and state level. And so there's a lot of power at the state level and city level. Public works is, if you look at a municipal budget, it's probably one of the biggest items in any city's budget, police, schools, fire, and then trash, right? Solid waste management. So cities have a lot of control over that budget and the power of the purse, right? And state government is what's regulating solid waste. And at the same time, even at the federal level, there's been, even under the Trump administration, there's been composting and recycling as a bipartisan effort. So we have to kind of jobs, farm prosperity, clean air, clean water, clean soil. So we gotta figure out what's in that Venn diagram and what's, what we have in common, and try to push forward on some of those issues, I think, and make the case to our elected officials at all levels.
Absolutely. No, thank you for bringing up that point, Brenda. And yeah, a lot of the movement around organics was actually started under the Trump administration, which is quite ironic, but a lot of work to be done. and a lot more fights as well. So I have one more question for folks for our panelists to answer, and really curious to hear from you all in terms of how can people support everyone's work in your groups and your organizations. How can folks hear about you, learn a little bit more? Do you have any asks, any events coming up? Just curious to open the floor to each of you to provide any other additional insights into the organizations, and how can folks get in touch with you, support you all in the work that you all are doing in your respective communities. And feel free to take a time. I know it's sort of a big question as well.
Well, I'll just go to our website, check us out. We're really interested in this moment we're in, how to frame fighting concentrated corporate power in a way that people get, and so we'd be interested in feedback on our programs for sure. I'll put in the chat if I can find it. Just the webinar I mentioned that's coming up in April, if you're interested in kind of how to reduce contamination in composting programs. So I'll put that in, but definitely with KT and Andrea here, I would say if you have money to donate, support their efforts.
Thanks, Brenda. KT, Andrea, any thoughts there?
Yeah, our upcoming event, so we'll be celebrating our 4th year of our compost hub. So it's gonna be our anniversary. That is like an in-person event. Follow our social medias, Instagram specifically, where we're most active on. A lot of the work we do in terms of zero waste, we'll be finalizing our zero waste plan. And the way we operate is how our members want to move forward with it. We'll be publishing that, and it's open. It'll be open for folks to review. Yeah, I would just say follow our newsletter, subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Instagram, see all the work we do. This is just like a slice of the work we do at East Yard. If it's not this, we're tackling anti-freeze recycling center in Compton. If it's not this, we're tackling a cleaning site, cleaning medical equipment site in the city of Bell Gardens. We tackle a lot of issues happening in our community, but in relationship to waste, zero waste and composting. We're out composting every Sunday at our compost hub. So just like follow us. A lot of folks from the community, it's been a community space and source for folks. And yeah, that's about it. We are trying to expand. I think it's just on the resources we have available, we just utilize. I'm gonna be sharing. I'm assuming we're gonna be sharing the presentations and slides. I'll have my contact information there, so feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to answer any questions from there. But yeah, thank you.
KT?
Such beautiful work, Andrea. Yeah, so with Breathe Free Detroit, because of what's going on the federal level, pretty much the focus is hyper local or global, right? So if you are in or near Detroit and you want to join the materials management planning process meetings with the county, those are open to the public, and we can use more advocates to making sure that that these public officials on a county level are including zero waste in the best practices to create an entirely new solid waste system for the state. Every county is doing that right now. You can also join the Green Task Force, the state and local policy subcommittee that I help co-chair and get involved, even if you're not here. It's always on Zoom. And I put my contact information in the chat if you want to get involved in those. But even more importantly, or equally important, on a global scale, please keep your eye out to the Global Plastics Treaty that's happening. The last meeting for
pretty much creating the treaty, negotiating the treaty, as it hasn't been even put together yet. So the last negotiations is happening in August. This is a great time to step in. Make sure that you're stepping into any of these changes while they're happening, not after they happen, because they're extremely hard to change. So yeah, please support all of the amazing efforts that are happening from NGOs across the world, and environmental justice delegates and Indigenous peoples, and all the incredible people that are going to these meetings and really pushing for the rights of human health and the environment for their communities. So yeah, those are a few things that y'all can help us focus on. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, KT. And before we close, I just want to take a moment to express my deep appreciation for our panelists and the larger FIP cohort as well. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts to bring your insights and your work here to everyone at this webinar and beyond. The work they're doing to implement zero waste systems in their communities doesn't just address local challenges, as KT mentioned. It paves the way for broader transformation at a global scale. For everyone. And so, as GAIA celebrates 25 years, we remain committed to this fight for as long as it takes until every community can breathe clean air, live free from pollution, and have the resources to build a just zero waste future as well. So with that in mind, we encourage you all to stay connected with us, sign up for our newsletter, join our networks, or keep organizing ultimately, and keep fighting the good fight. You'll find all the links and a follow-up email, as well as a recording of this webinar. But thank you again for joining us. We'll see you for the next and final webinar in this three-part series titled Using Science-Based and Legal Approaches on Tuesday, April 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the registration link will be sent in the follow-up email as well. So thank you all again. Thank you to our amazing panelists, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers, folks. Have a good one.